let's get started with this great webinar here. Hello and welcome to the Florida-Friendly Landscaping Program's Homeowner Webinar Series. My name is Jen Marvin. I'm the Florida Yards and Neighborhoods Statewide Coordinator. Today we have Tom Wichman speaking about how to hire a landscape professional. Your microphones have been muted. If you have questions, please type them in the chat box and we'll answer them at the end of the presentation. Please stick around until the end of the presentation to take the survey. It will pop up automatically in your browser. It helps us give you the kind of programming you like and lets us know how we're doing. Our next presentation will be October 19th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time on the history of tea. That should be a really interesting, good one. Let me just tell you a little about Tom here. Tom is a self-proclaimed plant nerd who has been in the horticultural industry for over 45 years. Tom is currently the statewide coordinator for the Florida-Friendly Landscaping Green Industries Pest Management Practices Program. This program teaches green industry professionals environmentally safe landscaping practices that help conserve and protect Florida's ground and surface waters and natural resources. Tom is the radio host for the Florida-Friendly Landscaping in a Minute radio show, which airs in 19 counties in Northeast Florida. Tom and the FFL team are working on season 2 of the television show Flip My Florida Yard, which can be found on the Discover Florida channel. When he is not working, Tom is in the landscape with his wife, Becky. Tom, Becky, and his daughter, Megan, are big Gator fans and enjoy following many different Gator sports throughout the year. So Tom, why don't you take it away?
Jen, thank you so much. And it is my pleasure to be here. And we've got a great audience from, looks like from all over the state, all the way from the Panhandle, all the way down to the Keys. So we've got a lot of people interested in potentially hiring a landscape professional. And, you know, this is one of those topics that it's not the fun, you know, gorgeous plant talks. You know, I love to talk about the beautiful blooming plants and the new varieties of plants and things, but it is such an important topic. And it's something that I think is, you know, I think hopefully at the end of the day, you'll have gleaned some information and maybe a few tips that might help you as you're looking for that, hiring that landscape professional to help you maintain your landscape. Let's see if I can get my slides to advance. Good. Here's the agenda of today. We're going to start out with a little bit of an announcement. Then I'm going to tell you a little bit about the GI-BMP program. Jen told you that I'm the statewide coordinator for the GI-BMP program, and it'll relate. And then we'll talk a little bit about some resources. And then we'll get into the meat of hiring a landscape professional. And then we'll finish off with a few landscape trends and potential pitfalls. So let me start first with let you know that the Florida-Friendly Landscaping Awards are now open. And we'd like to encourage you to enter. If you have a landscape that you're proud of, a sustainable Florida-friendly landscape that you're proud of and would like to show off, or maybe get a little recognition for all the hard work that you've put in, or maybe your landscaper has put in, but you're still proud of it, you know, consider entering. Right now, the entry deadline is November 21st. You see the link at the bottom of the page, and that'll kind of let you know exactly how to get to those applications. You can also get there from the Florida-Friendly Landscaping webpage, which is floridafriendlylandscaping.com. So if you know you haven't had a chance to write down that long URL, you can always just get it from the Florida-Friendly Landscaping webpage, floridafriendlylandscaping.com. But there are categories to fit most anyone. There's landscape awards. So we've got our residential landscape that might fit some of you. We've got new FFL construction, numerous other landscape awards. We've got educational and program awards for some of our instructors and educators out there. And then we also have photo awards. And so there is something that can fit most any landscape. If you're working hard in your landscape and you're really proud of it, please consider entering. These these awards do get, you get a very nice plaque that you'll get, as well as you'll get some recognition on our social media as well as on our website. So we'd really like to recognize those folks around the state that are doing such a great job. Here's just one image of the Hazleton residents. They won the Mature Landscape Photo Award, and that was 2 years ago. We only offer the Florida-Friendly Landscaping Awards every other year, so it doesn't come around that fast. So please consider applying for one of these awards. Let me tell you a little bit about the GI-BMP program. The Green Industries Best Management Practices program, the goal of that program is to minimize non-point source pollution in order to conserve and protect Florida's water resources. The first manual was created by the Florida Department of Environmental Protection back in 2002. The legislature made it mandatory for anyone applying fertilizer commercially to take our GI-BMP training, and that was in 2009. They made this mandatory, but they put a deadline of January of 2014. And so anybody applying fertilizer commercially has had to take our training, and then they applied to FDACS, the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, for their limited fertilizer license. We'll call it a license. It's actually a certificate, but to get that certificate, they have to take the Green Industries Best Management Practices training. It's a 6-hour training, and it covers quite a few different topics. These are the modules that are taught during that training. There's the introduction, the overview of the green industry BMPs, and then there's lawn and landscape, irrigation, fertilizer, and pesticide best management practices. Traditionally, this has been taught to the commercial industry because it's legislatively mandated that they take this training in order to get their license. But looking at different audiences, currently, by the way, since 2006, we've trained almost 70,000 people around the state. So we've taught a lot of folks, and we've trained a lot of folks. Still a lot of folks we haven't reached, especially in that commercial industry group. But we start looking at different audiences, and I think you start looking at some of our government officials, maybe some of those government landscape workers that are maintaining our landscapes for the cities and counties out there. I think our Homeowners Association board members, this would be a fantastic training for them to be able to take, so that they know what to ask and what to expect out of the landscapes that they're managing, certainly. And so as they're hiring their landscape professional, they know those critical things to look for and what to ask, and have realistic expectations. But I really think that just the general homeowner can certainly attend this as well. So you can always look for this from the local cooperative extension office, or you can go to the Florida-Friendly Landscaping webpage, and you can certainly see a calendar of upcoming trainings. The trainings are offered in multiple ways. They're offered in person via Zoom, as we're doing today, or they're also available online or through DVD, and they're available in English and Spanish at this point in time. So a lot of ways to get this knowledge, but certainly very valuable. I thought I would give you a couple of slides of information that I think are really important and pertinent to what we're talking about. And I want to tell you a little bit about non-point source pollution. That's what our program is all about. The Florida-Friendly Landscaping program is hoping to reduce non-point source pollution. And so hopefully this is a term that you'll be able to understand and recognize and know what it is. So what is non-point source pollution? Well, it's that pollution that it's difficult to figure out where it came from. So it's often associated with impervious surfaces or stormwater runoff. We compare this to point source pollution. Point source pollution, that's the pollution that you can kind of easily figure. Maybe there's a you've got a factory that has a pipe and you're seeing polluted water coming out of that pipe. It's really easy to focus and say, okay, that's where it's coming from. That's point source pollution. Non-point source pollution is much more difficult to figure out exactly where it's coming from. So it's coming from all sorts of different sources. And so it becomes a little tougher to figure out. It's these diffuse sources of pollution and in some cases nutrients that all affect a watershed. Remember, every one of us, all the water that comes off of our property, it does go into a watershed. Whether we live on a body of water or not, we're all part of a watershed. And so we want to make sure that anything that comes off of our property is as clean as possible, and we're not polluting. That non-point source pollution is often associated with everyday human behavior. Sometimes it's, you see the debris here that has been gathered in the grates, and oftentimes it's driven by stormwater. So that water that's flushing things off of our properties, off of our roofs, off of our driveways and roads, it has to go somewhere. And so some people call non-point source pollution pointless personal pollution. So what does non-point source and pollution affect? Well, it affects our water quality, certainly. And we're in Florida. We're surrounded by water. We've got water running all throughout the state in our streams and rivers, and we've got lakes all over. We've got a lot of water associated with the state of Florida. And so we use that. Certainly, we want to have clean drinking water. We like to play on that water. Some of us like to go fishing, and we want to make sure that we have a healthy fishing environment. And certainly that water needs to be clean and good for wildlife as well. So a lot of reasons to protect our water. And when you look at a slide like this, you see the hard surfaces, you see the roadway, you see the sidewalk, and you think about, okay, what happens to grass clippings and leaves that are blown into that roadway? Where do they go? Well, they're going right into that storm drain. If you're from other parts of the country, some of these storm drains go through filtration. They go to a water treatment facility before they're discharged. That doesn't usually happen here. What goes into that storm drain typically is that storm drain's leading right into that stormwater pond right behind those bushes. And so it's affecting directly that surface water body there. So think about what all goes into that. That could be oils, that could from our cars, there could be those leaves, those grass clippings contain a lot of nutrients. Any fertilizer, if someone was fertilizing the turf area there, if they let fertilizer get onto that hard surface and didn't sweep or clean it off, that'll end up into that storm drain as well. So anything that water can drive can certainly end up in our water bodies. And this is just an illustration showing, what comes off the roof. Certainly there are pollutants. There's feces from birds and things that wash off the roof. There could be bacteria and other things associated there. We've got animal waste, perhaps, that is coming off the lawn. We've got oils and things that come off of our driveways and roads. It all ends up in our water bodies. So we just need to think about the fact that, trying to keep as much water on our property and keep it from running off as much as possible, and that we can implement things like rain gardens and rain barrels and try and capture as much of that water as possible so it doesn't run off and end up carrying pollutants. One of those pollutants that people are very worried about is fertilizer. And, so why do we fertilize our plants? Well, plants are living things. They need nutrients to grow, and we'll supply those nutrients in order to increase the growth of a plant, maybe enhance its appearance, more blooms or, just larger size perhaps, or maybe to correct nutrient deficiencies. Now, do we have to fertilize a plant? every year or multiple times every year? Not really. As long as your plant is of adequate size, it looks good, it doesn't have any nutrient deficiencies, it's performing well for you, maybe you can skip a little bit of fertilization and don't have to apply those nutrients. So really let your landscape tell you when you need to apply nutrients. And we need to think about the timing of the year. Here we're looking at the turf plant that you see in the image here. And turf, the best time to fertilize turf is when it's actively growing. And because it has the most roots at that point in time that it can absorb the nutrients that you might apply. And one time we want to avoid fertilizing is certainly during the wintertime when there's a little more dormancy. Even in South Florida, some of the root system does degrade a little bit or slough off a little bit. And so it doesn't go fully dormant, but it does slow its growth a little bit. So best time to fertilize certainly is when it's actively growing. At the same time, we need to also look at fertilizer ordinances that may be out there. And a lot of communities have implemented blackout periods where we can't apply fertilizer. And so you need to make sure before you apply anything that you're checking with your local community to make sure that you're not violating any ordinances that are out there. All right, let's talk a little bit about the topic of the day. Do we need a landscape professional? I do my own landscape management. And, that's because it's my landscape. I have fun doing it, but not everybody has that, has that as one of their joys. They'd like to do something else. They'd like to go boating, or, they just don't have the time. Maybe they're working too much, or maybe the time that they do have, the little bit of free time that they do have, they don't want to spend it working in the landscape. To me, I find that very rewarding and something I love to do, but maybe you don't. So, do you have the time to manage your own landscape? Do you have the knowledge to manage that landscape? And that there's ordinances. We were just talking about that. And certainly there's certifications and a lot of different types of plants that are out there and different irrigation types. And a lot of people aren't comfortable working with their own irrigation system. In fact, a lot of people just don't even want to ever mess with their irrigation system. And it's not difficult, but we need to make sure that, that's something you're comfortable with. Fertilization, that's something, again, there's times of year that it's appropriate and it needs to be put on at the appropriate rate. And we want to make sure we're putting out the appropriate product at the right rate, and certainly at the right time. So there's a lot to think about with fertilization. Pest management, that's another thing that you got to think about. Do we know enough about the insects that we're controlling, insects or diseases that might be out there? Maybe it's not a problem at all, or maybe it doesn't require any sort of treatment. Maybe we can take care of it by hand, perhaps. Just a little bit of prune off one limb that might contain all the young pests, or maybe we can just collect them by hand and dispatch with them that way. And there's a lot of different pruning techniques and so things to think about. Do you have the equipment to manage your own landscape? And is it safe? Are those practices safe? I know that if anything gets too high in the trees overhead, I'm hiring a certified arborist to help me with my tree work. That's something I don't try and do myself. I can do some low branches and minimal pruning on low limbs, but anything that gets very high, I'm not going to get up high on a ladder and try and prune large limbs. That's where injuries start happening. So you need to be thinking about the safety of what you're doing, and think about the increased property value, whether it's you that's maintaining it or whether you're hiring somebody, but certainly a well-maintained landscape adds to the value of your home. So what you need to do really is to start evaluating your needs. What do you want? What do you have time to do yourself? What are you willing to do yourself? And then what do you want to contract out? What do you want to have someone else handle for you? Is it just the mowing? The mowing, maybe edging and blowing off the debris, a little bit of quick cleanup? Or are there other services like weeding your gardens and mulching and renewing that mulch once or twice a year, depending upon what mulch product you're using? Are you wanting that landscape professional to prune your shrubbery as well? Do you want them to add new plants to your landscape? Are you wanting them to maintain seasonal flowers, seasonal color? Do you want them to do the pest management for you? What about fertilizing that landscape? And what about if you're wanting to re-landscape and add to your landscape? Do you want them to do a design for you? Your irrigation maintenance is certainly something that most homeowners don't think about often enough. At least once a season, we ought to be checking our systems, running them during the day. Just turn them on so that you can walk around, make sure that we're not watering hardscape, that we don't have broken heads, that everything's facing the right way. You know, these are all things that should be addressed at least once a season. Do you need turf renovation? Do you need, turf replacement or renovation? That could involve verticutting, that could involve aeration, a lot of different things, turf management things that could involve. And what about tree care? We talked a little bit about that. It's a little more than I can handle, and more than most homeowners probably could do. So there's a lot of things to start thinking about. So walk around your landscape and start thinking about, just how much am I willing to do? And how much can you afford? There's a lot of resources out there. And one of these, this first one that's highlighted here, is the Hire Florida Friendly campaign, is on our website, on the Florida Friendly Landscaping website. This is the web page that is pictured here to the right. And you can just get there by going to hirefloridafriendly.com, and that'll take you right to that page. And there's some resources there. There's a checklist for hiring a landscape professional. There's recommended certificates and certifications, and then there's some Florida Friendly Landscaping example photos. And there's some text here that'll help guide you as well. And we'll cover some of this today. You don't have to take a ton of notes from this point on, because a lot of it can be gleaned from this checklist. So if you just go to that website and download that checklist, you'll have most of what I'll be talking about today. And so hopefully that'll be a real nice resource, so you can just sit and enjoy and listen to the rest of the talk and don't have to wear your hand out. Some of the other things you've got are the Florida Friendly Landscaping program at floridafriendlylandscaping.com has some free apps that are really helpful. There's a plant selection app that's just fantastic. A lot of you are familiar with our design guide or the Florida Friendly Plant List, the book that we print. That's available, has always been available online as well, but now we've got that in an app form that you can download to your phone. So it's available in the Google Play Store or in the Apple Store. So makes it really easy. You can have it on your phone, and it's searchable, and it's got all the great Florida Friendly landscaping plants. There's also a Florida Fertilizer Ordinance app that's available, and that's a mobile web app. You can get that on your desktop or on any device that you can get an internet connection. And that is really helpful because it can help you find out whether there are any ordinances, any blackout periods or ordinances in your area. So it'll use the GPS in your phone and figure out exactly where you are, and it'll pop up the correct ordinance that might be there if you have one. So that's a really good one. There's also a butterfly app, there's a bee app, and a toxic plant app. So all kinds of good apps that are available from the Florida Friendly Landscaping program. There's also a great extension fact sheet that's Florida Friendly Landscaping Guidelines for Community Associations, Considerations for Selecting a Landscape Contractor and Writing an Effective Contract. I know that the title says it's for community associations, but a lot of what's in there is applicable to homeowners as well. So it's a document worth looking at. So the link for that is pictured there, as well as don't forget about your local county extension folks. If anytime you have questions, This is a resource that hopefully most homeowners are becoming aware of and starting to utilize. And there's the expertise between the county extension agents and the master gardener volunteers. There's wonderful knowledge there that folks can get their questions answered. And so if you're confused, if you're not sure a direction to go, or you're not sure about some of the advice you're getting, you can always contact your local county extension folks. All right, let's get on with selecting a landscape professional. You're going to start out with any landscape professional. Before you sign any sort of contract or anything, you're going to want to interview those folks and make sure that they're giving you a nice written estimate. And communication is going to be the key. This relationship that you have with your landscape professional is it's imperative that you're able to have free communication, that they're able to explain to you what they're doing and when they're going to do it, and that hopefully you can understand that and ask the appropriate questions. I encourage you to get a written estimate from those folks. Make sure everything's in writing. That way there's never any confusion as far as, well, I thought you said this. Make sure that whatever they're going to do is in writing, and make sure that those professionals understand your expectations, and that what work is going to be included with whatever job you're contracting them to do. It's important that you know how often they're going to be coming, and that they're sharing the work that was performed. So how do you know what they did when, if you get a little note that says, X company was here today? How do you know what they did? Maybe you can see that they mowed the lawn. Do you know if they fertilized? Do you know if they did any pest control? It all depends upon what you've contracted them to do. But it's really important that they share with you what kind of work was done on your property. It's nice to know how they keep their employees up to date on the latest information. And hopefully they're sending those folks to the GI-BMP training and to other opportunities so those folks can continue to grow. It's good to know what experience the company has, and how long they've been in business. Maybe that's not the most important number, because sometimes some of the newer companies, are even more conscientious and better than some of those existing ones. It depends on the individual company. So it's really important to know how long they've been in business and what kind of experience they have. Get references. Make sure that they've got good references, and it's worthwhile to contact those references as well. Maybe check their social media profiles, check online reviews. A lot of places you can get information about companies. Maybe check their Better Business Bureau rating. Find out if they've got membership in professional associations. Make sure they've got all the relevant certificates and certifications. And find out about guarantees. What is their guarantee policy, and what happens if you're not satisfied with the work that's been done, and how will they make it right, and how long might that take to make that situation right? And then see if they have some pictures of some of the work they've done. They should come with some sort of a portfolio or a book that they can share with you. So, a lot of communication, a lot of checking with them as far as, the work that they do, and, hopefully you're understanding that work that they're describing to you. It's very important that you find out whether they've supply workers' compensation insurance for their workers, that they have general liability insurance, that their workers have the fertilizer applicator certificate. Now, remember, anybody applying fertilizer commercially, so anybody pushing that spreader for pay, has to have the GI-BMP training and have that fertilizer applicator certificate from FDACS. So it's really important that you understand that. If you're wanting them to do pest control on your property, then that's a different license that they would need, or they'd have to be working under someone that has a pest control license. So it's really important that you understand that they've got the correct credentials. And then other certifications they might have. We talked about GI-BMP, but the Florida Nursery Growers and Landscape Association, FNGLA, has great certification programs as well. See if they're certified through FNGLA. We also have the Florida-Friendly Landscaping Program has our Certified Professionals certificate that's out there, and that is available. We've got quite a few people that are now becoming FFL CP. So that's another one that's out there. Those folks doing tree work, they'll be ISA certified. That's International Society of Arboriculture. And so anybody doing tree work, you want to have them certified through ISA. The other thing, one other question you might want to ask is, do they follow the 9 Florida-friendly landscaping principles? And most of you are probably familiar with these, those that are master gardeners, but there's right plant, right place. There's water efficiently, fertilize appropriately, mulch, attract wildlife, manage yard pests responsibly, recycle, prevent stormwater runoff, and protect the waterfront. These 9 principles really are the core of this holistic way of looking at a landscape. And it pretty much covers everything and allows people to have very attractive landscapes, but ones that protect the environment. So one of the things that's in that checklist is a list of questions. This is the checklist for hiring a professional that's on our website. And it'll ask a whole bunch of questions that you can ask your landscape professional to learn a little bit more. And when we're dealing with irrigation, you can ask them, do they calibrate your irrigation system so you're applying 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch of water per application? That's the amount of water that's recommended by University of Florida. Can they help you set the irrigation controller schedule to meet the water management district rules? Because every water management district has rules for how often you can water, and that changes with the seasons. You want to maintain irrigation systems seasonally to adjust spray patterns and check for clogs and leaks. I talked about that. Every season we need to make sure that we're checking our irrigation system and checking the rainfall shutoff device for functionality. Every irrigation system should have a functioning rainfall shutoff device. This is a law, and it's something that we need to make sure that they're working. And then, do they recommend micro irrigation for planting beds? This is one way to really help save a great deal of water, and that can mean a lot of money for you, and certainly help protect our environment. As far as mowing, do they mow the grass at the appropriate height? Remember, there are different recommended heights for the different turf grass species. If you've got Bahia or one of the normal growing St. Augustines like Floritam, you're looking at a 3 to 4 inch mowing height. So you want to make sure that the lawn's not getting scalped. Hopefully they're never removing more than 1/3 of the leaf blade at any one time. This helps reduce the amount of stress on your grass and make sure that your lawn remains healthy. We want to keep the grass clippings in the lawn area and not on the hardscape. So if some of the grass is blown onto hardscape areas, make sure that it's either swept up or blown back into the turf areas. And hopefully they're breaking up any large clumps of grass clippings that might show up, especially after maybe if they're mowing after the grass was wet. That's not an ideal situation, but sometimes the grass could kind of clump up a little bit. Are they breaking that up? And you want to make sure that they're mowing with sharp mower blades and that they're changing the mowing direction at each mowing. That way that you're not getting ruts in the turf. And so it's a UF recommended practice, certainly. Some of the pruning and trimming practices that are out there, we want to make sure that if they're pruning your hedges and shrubs, that the bottoms of those plants are wider than the top. This is very important, kind of almost like a pyramidal shape that you're looking for, because the natural tendency when you're doing this is the top tends to become wider than the bottom, but that tends to shade out those lower limbs, and you end up very quickly ending up with just twigs down at the bottom, and it's not a very attractive shrub at that point in time. And so you're then either replacing or having to rejuvenate those shrubs. So just correct pruning technique will help keep those shrubs full to the ground. For any larger limbs, anything much over a quarter to half an inch. Should be using a 3-point cut method, or using a saw to do that 3-point cut. And so you look at that, make sure they're doing the correct pruning practices. Those palms shown in that picture at the right have been way over pruned. And this is something that we would never recommend. So when we're pruning palms, we recommend using the 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock method of pruning palms, meaning think about a clock. Anything above the 9 or above the 3, we wouldn't want to touch. And ideally, anything that's fully green, we don't want to remove. As long as there's green on that leaf, it's still producing food for the plant and still helping to produce food for that palm. Palms are weakling plants, and they're plants that do need to be fertilized from time to time, and we want to make sure that we're not over pruning them. For other shrubs, we're recommending that people use hand pruners instead of hedge shears. This will give a healthier plant and also a more naturalistic appearance. And it may take a little more time the first time or two that they're doing it, but if they're doing a good job, they should be using just those hand shears as opposed to hedge shears. It's different if you're looking at a formal hedge you're looking for that crisp, clean line. You can use hedge shears then, but it's not as good for the plant, certainly. And ask them if they sterilize equipment between job sites, and make sure that they're checking with local and state rules. This is especially important down in the southern part of the state where the mangroves come into the picture. They've got very special pruning laws that you need to know what you're doing before you touch mangroves. Tree care. If you've got trees that need to be pruned, that tree photo on the very right, that's the largest tree in the world. It's been getting a lot of press lately because there's the forest fires in Sequoia National Park right now are threatening this. This is the General Sherman tree. In July, I was in California and had a chance to see the General Sherman tree. It's an amazing tree. It's 36-foot diameter to that trunk. It's not the tallest, it's not the widest, but it is the largest by mass of trunk. So it's the largest tree in the world. Right now, that fire is threatening the General Sherman tree, and they've wrapped the lower trunk in a fire retardant reflective foil material. So you've probably seen that on the news, but scary time out west for some of our big trees. But for your trees that you have, hopefully you're not nobody's doing what you see in this picture in the center of the screen, lifting the trees too much, or topping trees. These are all things that we don't do. You want to hire somebody, when you're hiring somebody to do tree work for you, you want to make sure that they're a certified arborist. So that's certified through the ISA, the International Society of Arboriculture. They will have passed an exam, and they have to continue to get continued training in order to keep that certification up. They can identify potentially hazardous trees on your property. They're knowledgeable about tree care and tree health, and certainly can help you keep the value of your property at its highest. So what about choosing what products of fertilizer to apply? Well, hopefully anybody that you're hiring is following IFAS fertilizer recommendations, that they're following any local fertilizer ordinances, and that the fertilizers they're using are slow or controlled release products. You can ask those questions. Sometimes it's okay to use quick release products as long as they're putting those out at the right time and at very small rates. But those are questions you need to ask and understand exactly what processes they're using. Hopefully they're using soil tests to help determine fertilizer needs and adjusting fertilizer rates to account for nutrients in the water if they're using reclaimed water. And hopefully that professional is explaining to you what's being used, why they're using it at that particular time, in a way that is very understandable to you. If you're not understanding what's going on that way, if they're not able to explain it in a way you can understand it, contact the extension office, or get some more help somehow so that you can understand what's going on. It's your hard-earned money you're spending. You need to make sure that you're getting what you're asking for. As far as how they apply it, they should be using a broadcast spreader with a deflector shield. And the deflector shield will stop the fertilizer from being thrown on one side. That way, very little fertilizer will go onto hard surfaces or into bodies of water. And we want to definitely make sure that we are protecting our bodies of water. Hopefully they're calibrating their fertilizer spreader. Most of the commercial guys this is very routine for them, but it's a good question to ask. Hopefully they're sweeping up grass clippings and fertilizer, anything that's on hard surfaces, that it gets swept up and put back into the lawn. And we want to make sure that we're avoiding applying any fertilizer within 10 feet of any water body. All right, as far as when to apply fertilizer to turf, fertilize only when the grass is actively growing. Again, not when it's dormant, because we want to make sure that those nutrients aren't leaching down past the root system. We want to make sure that those roots are active and able to pick up those nutrients. Avoid applying fertilizer for 30 to 60 days after planting new sod. That sod is arriving to your property probably already with a charge of fertilizer already on it. Plus, it's not going to have an established root system to be able to pick up any nutrients that you would apply. So we never recommend applying any fertilizer to new sod for 30 to 60 days. And certainly follow all local fertilizer ordinances. Avoid applying fertilizer when heavy rain is predicted. So if an inch of rain or more is predicted, make sure you're not applying fertilizer. And make sure that the contractor will notify the owner of any nutritional deficiencies and what measures they recommend to take care of that. And avoid applying fertilizer for 14 to 30 days after planting shrubs as well. New shrubs and things we don't need to fertilize right away. We want to make sure water is the key to getting new plants established. And then once they start putting some roots out into that surrounding environment, then we can think about applying some fertilizer. As far as pest management goes, we're hoping that they're checking the landscape plants for pests on a regular basis. Find out how often they scout the landscape. It's what we call it when they're going around. And it's more than just walking around. It's actually looking at the plants, turning leaves over, making sure there aren't holes or notches cut out of the leaves, making sure the color is good. Make sure that they're identifying pests before considering any sort of management strategy, and that they choose the least toxic treatments first, and that they're spot treating just the areas where the pests are found and not blanket treating the entire landscape. That helps protect our beneficials and reduces the impact on the environment. And hopefully they're posting a notice of pesticide treatments and always following pesticide label instructions. Remember, whenever we're talking about pesticides, the label is the law, so we want people to be following what's on the label. If they're doing landscape design work, make sure that they're putting plants in conditions that are appropriate for the plant. That's the Florida-Friendly Landscaping principle #1 is right plant, right place. It's so important, and it covers so many things. We could talk a long time just on right plant, right place. We'll talk a minute or two at the end just about that principle as well. Hopefully they're using the results of a soil test to help guide that plant selection, that they're putting plants in the ground based upon mature size. So in other words, they're giving the plant room to grow. It might look a little small when it first goes in, but you have to let those plants have some room to grow so that they can be healthy. And select Florida-friendly plants when landscapes are designed. Remember, we've got the app and we've got our Florida-friendly plant list that certainly doesn't include all Florida-friendly plants, but has a good place to get started from. We want people to group plants by their water needs, and this way you can maximize your irrigation and reduce waste. And that way, any plants that are high water users, you can all group together on one zone perhaps, and you can save a lot of water that way. And remove invasive plants that are on the IFAS assessment list. Anything that's listed there as invasive or potentially invasive should be removed. And plan turf areas to be functional, and design them that they're easier to maintain. So nice sweeping lines and no real sharp curves and things. Other things, tips with landscape design: use shrubs and ground covers where grass won't grow well, and that's real important. And design landscape features that retain runoff on your property. We talked about that earlier with rain gardens and swales and berms. Use porous materials for walkways and patios. So there's porous concrete, there's porous blacktop, and certainly our porous pavers. Here we've got stepping stones that are not mortared together, so water can certainly get between them. And use plants to provide food for wildlife. So those that we want to layer our landscape with different height plants, and we also want to plant plants that have berries and things that our wildlife can certainly snack on and dine on. And we also want to make sure we're providing a water source for our wildlife. Use host and nectar plants for butterflies, hummingbirds, and other pollinators, and retain existing clusters of vegetation when you're designing that landscape, because trees clumped together certainly will benefit in a storm. They kind of protect each other. And plant installation. Make sure that they're following IFAS planting guidelines. On the right, you see the latest recommendation for planting trees, making sure that the root ball is slightly higher than the existing soil. We don't mulch over the root ball of our trees, but we mulch up to it. We ensure that shrubs are at least 2.5 feet away from the foundation of our home. We're only selecting quality plants. The mulch that we apply should be installed at a depth of 2 to 3 inches. And we specify that mulch is pulled away from the base of trees and shrubs, and use only Florida-friendly recommended mulches. And ensure that plants are watered for establishment. So making sure they're watered often enough and for a long enough time to become established so that they can survive on their own without additional irrigation, except during drought. So that's the key to our Florida-friendly plants. They're all drought-tolerant plants. Once they're established, they should be able to survive without supplemental irrigation except during drought. So let me talk a little bit about some landscaping trends, things to think about as let you dream a little bit about your landscape, and you can, as you're talking with your landscape professional, hopefully they'll help guide you along a little bit. But there's outdoor kitchens, and outdoor furniture has gotten to be very important and very popular. People are creating these outdoor rooms and spending more time outdoors, even watching television outdoors. There's a lot of waterproof televisions and things that they're incorporating into their outdoor environment. So if you can make it your own little oasis, why not make it as comfortable as it can be, so that you have the conveniences of home right there out in the landscape. Other landscape trends is more hardscape. Having walkways to guide you through a landscape is really important, and make sure that hardscape is permeable wherever possible. That picture you see on the left is the way things have been done for years and years on college campuses. They would put new buildings in, and they would wait to put the sidewalks in until they saw the traffic patterns where people walked. And then in all of those, what we'll call cow paths that were created by all the people walking through the turf areas, they would then go through and put their sidewalks in at that point in time. Hopefully with your home landscape, you can do a little better planning and provide for direction for folks. And by putting in, whether it's stepping stones or paver walkways or whatever material you're using, make sure you're guiding them through their landscape so that they get an experience as they're walking through the landscape. And that top picture that you see that's permeable concrete, and that allows the water to just flow right through. Permeable pavers will do exactly the same thing. A lot of people are wanting to incorporate edibles into their landscapes, and certainly that fits with a Florida-friendly landscaping theme. So just needs to be chosen properly and maintained correctly as well. But certainly edible plants are part of a Florida-friendly landscape. Don't forget about using containers and plants with interesting growth habits, like a weeping habit, perhaps. There's a lot of really cool plants coming out that have different growth habits and growth forms that are really unique. And don't forget about color, whether it be colorful flowers or colorful foliage. Color can really provide some wow in a landscape. And when you're looking at landscaping the front of your home, or you're looking at your current landscape, we want to make sure that the front of your house is visible. This has a lot of cool, image has a lot of cool plants in it, but the house is hidden at this point in time, and that's not good for emergency vehicles that may need to find your location. Also, it's just not very welcoming. So, think about making sure that the front of the house is visible, and make sure you're choosing plants for your landscape that won't outgrow what's behind them. So, on that image to the left, we've got a hedge of pittosporum there that's growing up over the windows, and it's kind of foreboding and not very welcoming, certainly. And you can't see out from inside. And then we always see large plants planted too close to the front door, and people have to trim around it. As you can see, this arborvitae has had to be trimmed just so people can get to the front door. Certainly not the right plant for the right location. And simplify pruning. You can certainly see beautiful pruning, examples of pruning. This is at Epcot in Orlando, but this isn't something you want to have to do in your own home landscape, or even really probably hire somebody to do. This would be very expensive and very costly. So simplify pruning. Make sure you're pruning with your hand shears instead of hedge shears. And that way we have a little more naturalistic look to the landscape, as opposed to this more managed and dominated landscape. And make sure palms are pruned correctly. This image here on the right has a number of things going wrong. Number one, we see this person is climbing this palm with spikes. You don't ever want that to be done. Don't ever let anybody climb your palms with spikes, because those wounds that they're putting into the trunk of that palm, it's entry for disease, and they'll never cover over and heal. And so that's something that you want to be careful with. And again, we never want to hurricane prune palms like you're seeing being done here. You want a more rounded canopy. Again, never cutting anything between that 9 or over that 9 and 3. So these are a little healthier, a little better pruned. When you're creating beds and putting plants into your landscapes, try and group your trees in planting beds. And so rather than having a little circle around every one of these trees and having to mow a circle around every one of these trees, why not create one big planting bed with a nice self-mulching area underneath? It'd be a much healthier area and a lot less work in the long run. And this image here on the right, that nice little European fan palm, it's very lonely sitting there in the middle of that turf all by itself. One is a very lonely number, they say, and I'm not going to sing it, I promise. But wouldn't that be so much nicer with a garden space around it and some ground covers to accent it, and it wouldn't be quite so lonely and lost in that landscape. And use turf where it's appropriate. These areas between the sidewalk and the curb, these verge areas are very difficult to manage because they tend to dry out faster than the rest of the turf does. And it's these thin little strips become very difficult to maintain. So that's an area you might want to think about removing the turf and putting a nice ground cover in. For other turf areas in the yard, you might want to make sure that the turf is functional, that you have the amount of turf that you need to be able to recreate, to be able to play, and to give that the appearance that you're really looking for. But other areas, you might want to increase the size of some of your beds and add more shrubs and other plant material. For watering, make sure that you're watering efficiently. Use micro irrigation systems, especially in your beds. And then think about the addition of some of the smart irrigation components, whether it be one of these soil moisture sensors that you see here on the right, or a smart irrigation controller that maybe even waters according to the weather patterns in your area. So all kinds of options that are out there that can save a lot of water. It's saving you money. It's also helping to protect our environment and our natural resources. And if you are watering, make sure you're watering efficiently. Don't forget, hand watering is acceptable. For those container gardens and things, or small beds of color, carrying a watering can out there works really well. And if you collect that water in the rain barrel, you can put it in the watering can and distribute it as needed. So these are all ways to be a little more environmentally friendly and conscious of our landscapes. And don't forget about watering when plants really need it. I don't run my irrigation system on a schedule. I water it when I see plants wilting and signs of drought. And on the right, you see here the grass blades are folding in half, or if they, depending on the species of grass you have, they may tend to roll. When you see that from about a third of the lawn, then it might be time to pop up the irrigation and time to water. Wilting is a natural process for plants, and as long as you don't let it go too long, they'll perk right up, and it's important. But do realize that water restrictions change with the seasons. Plant water needs change with the seasons. So if you do have a scheduled system on your irrigation system, make sure you're updating it with our different seasons. And as much, at least here in North Central Florida, we've had a very wet summer. And so we haven't had to irrigate much at all here in Gainesville. I know it's different from other parts of the state, but it's you need to learn to watch the weather a little bit and monitor what's happening in your environment. The last slide I'm going to show today is about protecting the waterfront. And it's a concept and a topic that I think is so critical and so important that I think it's really important to cover today. So we want to establish a 10 to 20 foot buffer zone, and we'll call that a low maintenance zone or low maintenance buffer zone between the water and the landscape. And in that area, we're not wanting to fertilize. If you're doing any sort of pruning, you're picking up any of your clippings, you're not mowing in that area. Hopefully it's filled with Florida-friendly plants as well. So this is going to help protect that water body. It's going to absorb nutrients, provide wildlife habitat, and certainly protect against erosion. So a lot of good things that those low maintenance buffer zones can do. And it doesn't have to be real tall, so it doesn't have to block your view, but a lot of beautiful plants can be added to this area, and it's something we need to look at in really protecting our water bodies. And with that, I appreciate you listening to the talk today. Hopefully I've given you some thoughts and resources that can help you choose a good landscape professional.
Thank you, Tom. Excuse me, we have a couple questions.
Okay.
The first one, if you could address best practices to control and get rid of weeds on lawns, as well as what is safe to apply. I was actually going to reply with our, we have a natural weed control webinar that I've just put in the text box.
Fantastic. That's certainly a great place to start. The best defense against weeds is a nice, thick, healthy lawn. Anytime that there's open spaces, that you leave open spaces, that's potential for weeds, because weeds are going to beat out the turf every time. So if you do have bare spaces, maybe chinch bugs took out a section of your grass, or some disease came and wiped out a small section of your grass. Don't just leave that bare area there. It's gonna be filled with weeds before long. So take it and bring in some fresh sod or plugs and make sure you're establishing something there, because again, the weeds will beat out the turf every time. So the best defense against weeds is a thick, healthy lawn.
Great. Can you suggest a source for these buffer zone plants along the water?
You know, a lot of our garden centers, the better garden centers, are starting to carry a lot of native plants, but a lot of native nurseries might be some of your best choices. And talk to the garden centers. And if they don't have what you need, oftentimes they have the resources to be able to get those plants. A lot of great documents that UF has on helping you choose plants for those type situations. So you can look at some of those plant lists. I know that there's some webinars that have been done as well that can help, but that's a whole nother, we could do a multi-hour session on choosing plants for those areas. And maybe that's another webinar that we do, Jen. And but certainly you can look at some of the UF documents. Check your local nurseries and check some of the native plant nurseries as well.
This is a question regarding the buffer zones around water bodies again. Why does the county spray herbicides that kill all plants on the shores of water bodies if buffer zones are beneficial?
There's a lot of education that still needs to be done. And, you know, we don't want grass going all the way down to the water. And so in some cases, they might think that they're doing the right thing because they're not having to mow all the way down. And again, we don't mow in those low maintenance buffers, but we want plant material there, because if you don't have any plant material there, then you're going to start getting erosion, and that causes its own set of problems with that area. A lot of it comes down to education. So there's a lot of there's a whole change in perceptions and, you know, what our water lines should look like. And that there's a lot the public needs to learn as to really what that should look like in order to keep the water, that water body healthy and happy, and reduce some of these erosion problems and things. So a lot of times people are afraid to have plants around the water line because they're afraid of wildlife like snakes that might be there. But you know, that the wildlife that's attracted there, it's all part of a healthy ecosystem. And it's kind of why we live in Florida, because we love the wildlife. We love natural Florida.
A lot of people are concerned about losing their view as well.
And if you choose the plants right, you know, your view certainly won't be diminished. And you can even, you know, incorporate. I like to incorporate even some trees down near the water line, some bald cypress trees and things. But I do that on the flanks, on the outside, so that my view is filtered between them. But I certainly wouldn't want to disrupt my view as well. So I agree. That's a concern.
All right, ground covers versus turf, which requires less water and maintenance?
That's an impossible question to answer, but let me give you a little bit on that. It depends on the plants that are being chosen, certainly, and it depends on the site that you're at. Certainly, turf is often, more often than not, probably overwatered. And many times our turf can survive with much less water than anyone would ever think. And so it would depend on what turf and what ground covers are chosen. Some of our turf grasses, like Bahia, can survive even very long drought periods. It may go dormant, it may turn brown in between irrigation events, but when first time it rains or first time it gets irrigated, it can green up again. Other grasses don't have that ability. Some of our ground covers are very drought tolerant and need very little irrigation. So we just want to make sure that we're using turf for functionality, that we have the turf that we need. But ground covers are great options where turf isn't appropriate or where turf won't grow. There's a lot of wonderful ground cover plants that could be utilized. And so I don't encourage people to use just one plant. I like a lot of diversity in a landscape. And I think that that's really, really an important concept. If a disease or insect problem pops up, we don't want the entire landscape going down. We want to make sure that we've got, a lot of different plants in our landscape. And so it's one of the reasons why we have some minimum requirements of a number of species of plants for a Florida-friendly recognized landscape.
All right. For those HOAs with contractors, how many years do you write a contract for? 1, 2, 3, etc.
It depends if there's benefits to signing a longer contract. If you can lock in a price that you're comfortable with, and that price can be guaranteed for a longer period of time, you might want to sign a longer contract, but you always want to make sure that there is you understand the way out of that contract too. So if you're not happy with the end product of what's being done, the work that's being done and how it's being done on your property, you want to know what the process is for getting out of that contract. Oftentimes it's a 30 days written notice, and that you can void a contract, but know that going in and ask that question in that interview process. I don't think I had that listed, but I think that was an excellent question. If you are signing a contract, you should know how you can get out of that if one or both parties is not happy.
Great. Should aquatic landscapes be done by specialists different from regular landscapers?
Well, certainly, if you're just talking about the shorefront that we're talking about, the waterfront area, that buffer zone area, you want to make sure whatever landscaper is doing it, that he understands the plants that can be chosen for that. And so I wouldn't say that every landscaper is comfortable with that and has experience. So find out what kind of experience they've had, maybe get some references, maybe be able to see some pictures of some of the work they've done with those type settings. If we're actually talking about plant material that's going all the way into the water, that's going to be even a little more higher specialized, and make sure that again that they have those that experience before you start hiring someone.
Okay. Are there BMPs for pond maintenance or pond landscape?
Certainly that buffer zone area, there's very little maintenance that we want to see happen there. We're not fertilizing. We're not we're not mowing in that area. We're doing very minimal pruning in that area. If we are pruning, we're taking those prune clippings and removing them from that space so that those nutrients don't end up in the water. So there are some best management practices for the management of retention ponds and things, and that might be the best place to look.
Okay. A specific question says a laurel oak has shaded out lots of the zoysia. Any low ground cover would be smothered by 95% of the leaves that will fall. Suggestions for that space? Laurel oak has very heavy shade.
Yeah, and oak trees can create very shady situations. Depends on the ground cover that you're looking at. Some of the shade tolerant ground covers could do just fine without necessarily being smothered out. They may take a little bit of, sometimes it may take a leaf rake to just rake through them, and depends on the ground cover as to whether you can do that or not. Sometimes some low shrubs won't typically We would classify some low shrubs as ground covers, depending upon how tall those are or what the growth habit is. And they may not get smothered as much as some of the viney type ones or ground covers that lay flat on the ground, like you might be thinking of. So I can think of some of the Florida U's that I've got as a ground cover. And I actually occasionally, when they get covered with my laurel oak leaves, I actually go and I lift the branches up and shake them just a little bit, and then rake out a few of the leaves from those beds. So there are ways to work around that. It's not terribly difficult. Sometimes we can blow the leaves out of some of these areas too. So so I've seen that done with blowers. So if you have some of those, that could be helpful as well. The biggest thing is you just want to make sure that you're not blowing things out. If you are blowing them onto hard surfaces adjacent, that you do clean them up.
Okay. Do you have a list of landscape contractors on your site?
We do not have a list of landscape contractors. Our job is to educate people on what to ask. There are some lists of, if you're hiring certified arborists, for instance, you can go onto the International Society of Arboriculture website, and they will provide you that list of certified arborists. We do have a list of folks that have on our website that have passed our GI-BMP certified, but there's not a list of recommended contractors. That's something that you're going to want to check around with some of your friends and neighbors, see who they use, see if they're satisfied. And then again, you'll want to go through that interview process that we talked about.
Okay. Is there a list on saltwater air plants, say containers on the beachside area that will handle the salt air?
So you're just looking for salt tolerant plants, and certainly that's something that our Florida-friendly plant list can be. Yep. You can access that and search for that criteria for salt tolerant plants, and that is one of the criteria that's listed in our Florida-friendly plant list. So, or you can talk to your local extension office or local nurseryman, and they can help recommend plants that would tolerate those type conditions.
Okay. Where can I find a landscaper that isn't just someone who mows the grass?
There are different categories of landscape contractors. Some of those are, the mow and blow guys, and that's all they do is they'll mow, edge, and blow pretty much. And then there's the more full service ones that will, do design and installation of landscapes. They'll do irrigation, they'll do management, as well as fertilization and pest control. They'll do it all. And so, that's just you doing a little bit of hunting, checking around, maybe Google about landscape maintenance companies in your area, and you can go from there. But there certainly are going to be a mix. Some of those that are just the mow and blow guys, and then some that are full service.
And last question, where to find comprehensive information about permeable concrete and other hardscapes that are FFL compliant?
Good. The Florida-friendly landscaping has some information on that, certainly, and University of Florida is getting more information on that. There's a lot more coming out, and a lot more research, and a lot more recommendations. So I would start first, going with, UF. So if you ever want to search something, IFAS is a great way. The Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences is what IFAS stands for, IFAS. And when I Google something, I always put, if I want University of Florida information, I'm just putting IFAS in whatever search topic I'm wanting, and you'll be able to get documents on that that'll help guide you along and be able to find those permeable recommendations on permeable pavers, and anybody that supplies any of the hardscape, as long as you're asking for the permeable materials, they'll be able to let you know what's available at that point in time.
Great, Tom. That was our last question. Thanks for the great webinar today. We hope to have you back for some other session maybe next year.
I would love to be back, and everybody have a great day, and thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much. Have a great day.